All right, let's get started. I'm Jonas Sorgenfrei. I'm an FX and pipeline TD at RiseFX in Berlin, and thanks to side effects, I'm here today to present Houdini 20 feathers. I think first to mention, I didn't do that eagle. That was Andri, and yeah, but I'm today gonna show you how to do actually a groom, how to start from nothing to getting something rendered. So hopefully a step-by-step solution. So once Houdini comes out, you can dive right in and get your stuff started. So at Rise in summer this year, we had a project where we had to use feathers, and since Houdini 20 announced their new feathers tools, I had the chance to look into them and to use them. Unfortunately, this project is still ongoing, and I cannot show anything from that show here today. So I had to build everything from scratch at home after work. Luckily, this means I can share all the files, so you have something to start with once you want to dive into feathers. Yeah, I'm going through the whole process from feather creation, the grooming, how to simulate them, how to actually rig them and animate them, and how to export them, plus in the end some pitfalls and tricks that I found by the time of creating the presentation using the tools. So to get everyone on the same level, here are like the 3 main points of, or like 3 main keywords of a feather: the shaft, which is the main core of the feather; the barbs, which are little filaments which come out from the shaft; and we have like the extra barbulus, which are like very tiny, hairy filaments on the barbs, especially on the lower regions of the feather. So before I start with the new data structure, how the feathers works, let's take a look into how it was done before. People have been doing some feathers with Houdini, and prior to Houdini 20, most of the times, or most of the feather systems that I found were like one curve, and every barb is represented by its own curve, which creates its own entity with all the overhead that comes with extra points and extra geometry. In Houdini 20, this overhead was tried to address, and instead of having like a lot of polygons, we just have one polygon which represents the whole feather. And and the feather or the barbs are defined by arrays which are stored as attributes to the points on the shaft curve. So the points on the shaft curve define the barbs, and the barbs are stored in this array and are oriented based on the barb orient attribute. This makes it especially like very fast to draw on the GPU with its procedural shader. An OpenGL geometry shader is used, and later in Vulkan, a tessellation shader will give us even some more speed up, as we will see later in this presentation. As you might know from the hair in the viewport, we can visualize the width. So activating this shader is still possible using the Shade Open Curves option on the geometry node, which will enable us to see the feather. So once you start your first feather scene and you don't see anything, make sure that Shade Open Curves in viewport is enabled. Additionally to not being in wireframe, because in wireframe you will only see the curve. Okay, let's start. How to define our feather, and there are 2 main tools which are new. The Feather Shape Organize node, which lets us define in an artistic way how to create the feather, and the Feather Template from Shape, which actually create the feather, and I show this in the following video. Afterwards, we can use the Groom process node to give us some extra detail to the feather barbs in a way that we already know it from the hair workflow. Okay, so here we have we create the feather template, and we have our feather shape where we can define the shaft curve, and this shaft with this curve and the outline of it, we can define the shape of our feather. And yeah, in an artistic way inside of the viewport. We can drag and drop those points, and using the typical curve tools that we know already. Additionally, we have the second input to the feather shape organize node, which lets us define the profile of that of the barbs. And as you can see here, I can add those details. And using, for example, our reference behind our main feather, you can then match it to your reference. After having this already set up, we can control with our feather template node the barb density and the width can be as well controlled in this node based on the curve view of the main feather. Can I close this a little bit? Okay, here I created a network, which you will find as well in the files which are attached, and the feather uncondensed in this case creates actual points from our curve as that we can then use to split up, for example, the barbs from the shaft and then the barbs on each side to actually create our detail that we want to add to our curve. In this case, I used the clump node, and as you can see in the second input, I have my shaft curve in, which is the skin. So the guide process can then be used to add some frizziness to the curve, to the feather, and we can then transfer the positions to our main point. So if we change, for example, the order, and the feather match uncondensed is then bringing it back to the main feather, and then we have our main feather with this extra stuff. So using this method, we can create our feather library, which is a subset of all the feathers that we might use for our groom. And we can use it for either direct placement or interpolation, which you see in the following slides. I found two really nice websites which I wanted to show here, and they have really good references with size and colors and shapes of feathers, which you can just plug behind your feather as reference. I hate it. So here I created this feather library, and I had my reference behind my feathers, and I can then place my profile curves and the main curves to define my feather inside. And after I did the layout of all those feathers, I cached them out because I don't have to recook it every time I open my scene then. So it's really highly recommended. And as you can see here, I can then export them as well to, for example, the texture department, so they can texture our feathers. So then we can use the guide groom node to actually place our feathers as we did it with hair previously on other characters. And the following video shows how to do this. Okay. The guide groom. So we can enable this new tab, the feathers, and put our template feathers inside this template geometry sub, and then select the feather that we want to use. Make sure to set the feather settings so the orientation is activated with the barb orient attribute, as we learned it before, that this is used to define how the feather is oriented. And then we can place our feather on our bird by manually placing them or drawing them. And the cool thing is we can use all the modes that this guide groom node offers us, and enable as well mirroring if we want the feathers to be mirrored on the other side. And use, for example, the sculpt node that can be used then to shape our feathers in the right direction that we want to have it. And additionally, there's the orientation mode, which is really nice. Make sure once you dive first into that orientation mode, that it's in camera space. So it tries to rotate the feathers so that they face the camera. So change it to rotation, and then you are free to rotate them as you want. This was something I found in the beginning a little bit complicated to find. And here we have it for an already existing groom, where we come to in the next slide. But it shows that we can use this guide groom after we have our feathers already planted on our bird. In this case, I used some lower resolution for our feathers. And this is possible with the feather resample node. And then we can use the guide groom node to actually have our already existing feathers, and then as you can see in real time, sculpt our feather body. And with the feather visualize node, you can actually show a surface representation of the feathers. And here, as you can see, the colors are taken with you. So, for example, to define different kinds of feathers, they can be visualized using this. Cool. And another addition to Houdini 20 is the texture mask paint, which is not just something which is coming up in, which is used in grooming. This can as well be used for every other purpose as an alternative to the attribute paint node. So you can now draw geometry resolution independent on that geometry in UV space. And this example shows you how to, for example, draw different kind of feathers. And the feather interpolate node, which is added here as well, is coming alongside with it to then use an interpolation. So here I drew it, and you see maybe in between the color, which is showing how the feathers are interpolated in between. So the feathers and the attributes of the feathers can be interpolated. The one thing to keep in mind for the feather interpolate, it's still in this state, it still needs a little bit of wax to define those template names and template weights. And this is something that I provide you with the file, so you can have it working easily. And here I show the same workflow on an actual bird, where I did some feather masks. One thing which I already prepared here is having a base groom as a hair groom. So I skipped this process to keep it a little bit smaller. And then I use this node, this feather interpolate node, to interpolate feathers based on the input curves that we have here. So this is just some curves with a hair generator, then sculpted with a guide brush. And then we can have our feather instance on it based on this feather instance node workflow. And we can even paint in real time on it. And as long as your feathers are not too high res, so I had a little bit lower resolution for the feathers here in this video as well, it reacts in real time as well, depending on your hardware, especially on your GPU hardware. All right. And here it shows how it actually works when using this interpolation. So we have the feather template interpolate, which actually does the interpolation. So every curve or every feather that we have in the end is its unique variant. So it does an interpolation, and even the same feathers will be unique feathers. Additionally to this, we have the feather instance pool, which is a node that is creating packed agents and does some instancing of the same feathers. So it tries to figure out which feathers are similar, and then we have it. And maybe if you see the frame rate on the bottom, you saw that the normal instancing mode is a little bit slower. Once we use this instancing workflow with an actual packed agents or packed feather agents, it will be faster. And in the end, I showed an example of how it will be in the Vulkan viewport with the tessellation shader. We get a speed up even on our feather template interpolate already around 30 FPS. Cool. Then we have the feather blend node. This node enables us to sculpt our feathers on the bird, and this is really cool. We can use it with the sculpt tools or with other geometric operations, for example, booleans, to create our outer surface, and the feather surface node tries to match this outer surface and fills the volume of the bird, which is where I had some problems getting this done nicely with just a guide process lift operation. So here I paint some areas on our surface, and the feather surface node will interpolate the feathers so they match this new shape to generate some nice volume. Then we can use some other groom tools, as the feathers are, as I said, just polylines. They can be groomed with the existing guide process nodes, and some of the modes got some additional barb mode, which is working on the barbs and not on the whole curve. And we have the feather noise and the feather clump node, which can add extra detail on the groomed feathers in world space. So we had in the beginning the details on the feathers, and now we can add this extra detail on the extra feathers. And yeah, here we see the feather clump node in action, where we have some parameters to control the clumpiness. We can override a lot of those parameters with those texture masks on the bird or on the groom or the guide curves itself to define where we want this actual clamping. And the feather noise is giving us some extra frizziness, and using this texture masked paint, it will be possible that you can define maybe special areas of your bird where you want to have like a really fluffy look. Oops. This. Cool. And after we have your basic room set up with all those tools, you can use the feather deintersect node, which enables you to order the feathers so they get this typical pattern that we already saw, for example, on that eagle before. And this node is GPU accelerated, so it will be super fast. If you have like a huge groom with a lot of detail, it might get a little bit slower, but because of this GPU acceleration, you will see that it works on this high-res groom. And in this example, I had like a very frizzy haircut to just check it out, how it actually works on not like the perfect feather. And yeah, as you can see here, it does some nice alignment, and we can use the thickness of the feather to define the distance between the feathers to deintersect them accordingly. The deintersection is based on some surface deintersection and then transfers this new deformation to the actual feather. All right. Once we're done with our groom, we're going to simulate it and deform it. And as I'm an FX artist, this is something that I really like to play around with. We first have the feather resample node, which we already saw in some examples before. We can use this node to increase or decrease the amount of barbs on the feather to create our proxy lower res feather in this case. And afterwards, we can use the feather surface node to create a polysurface representation, which can be used with the vellum solver as a class simulation to get some nice simulation on our feathers. A cool attribute that this feather surface nodes give us is the norm UV, which you see on the right here, which is creating a parametrization around over the feather from the shaft to the top and from the right barbs to the left barbs. And you can use this to drive your constraints on the vellum clause setup. The feather deform node can then be used to deform the high-res groom based on this surface proxy representation. And I have an example here. I built a completely new groom in this case on this ball to showcase it, and I animated this ball, and then created my proxy representation of the feather with the feather resample node. Used the guide groom node to actually rotate and deform it, as the feathers are just curves. The guide deform can be used there, and afterwards create the surface representation, which I can then use with the vellum solver to actually simulate our feathers. And you see it works quite well. I did some pre-simulation here, so that's why it's so fast. And afterwards we have our deformed animation, and we have to first capture the weighting for the deformation with this feather deform node in capture mode. It's a little bit like the point deform, where you can have the option to first capture the weighting and then deform them afterwards using de-deform mode. And this is what is shown here. And this is now real-time playback, and even with this high-res groom, it's pretty fast. Even on my GPU, I don't have the best one. And here I have an example of that in motion, even with this really rough movement. It feels pretty satisfying. Cool. I took as well a look into rigging and animating our feathers. And we can use the feather primitive node, which creates an packed agent, which is under the hood, the node which is used in the feather instance pool node. And this packed agent can then be used with our Kinefix toolset to animate and deform our feather. And afterwards, we can use a bone deform or an agent post from rig to actually bring this back to our high-res feather. So here we have the example. The feather primitive is creating this agent with its skeleton. We can then use the agent character unpack node to separate the skeleton. And I did some reparenting for the barbs to the shaft curve, which is in this Python code there, and then attached some joint geometry to have a nice animation tool for it, and then we can use the typical animation tools on this skeleton, and this will deform our main feather based on it. And we can, which is cool on Kinefix, now still, for example, increase the resolution of our barb joints without even changing the shaft animation. And this works as well with a little tweak that I did. That's why I unpacked the feather primitive node. Maybe it will be in soon after the release or before the release, where I have actual different names for each feather skeleton, and now can rig and animate all my feathers at the same time, and see it directly with the bone deform in this case. Or select multiple curves at the same time and deform them. and animate them with keyframes. And probably it will really, or I'm pretty sure that it will work nicely as well with Apex. And here I had prepared some animation or procedural animation by just opening the feathers. And yeah, on the left side, the agent packed from rig node is putting it back on the packed feather agents, or the packed agents. Then we have some ways to export our feathers, and we can first use the uncondensed node, which I already showed you, where we can create our low-res, where we can convert our feather into actual points and polylines, or use the feather surface node to create some proxy generation. And in combination, you can use it, for example, as a USD proxy for your feathers, which can be shown or exported in your USD layer. And it can as well be used to promote barb attributes if you have, for example, colors on your barbs already defined. Yeah, this can be done. And for the USD export, you can just import the condensed feathers, so just the polyline with the attributes, to Solaris and use the feather procedural for this. Here I show an example of how I did this. First I did some animation, so to have actually moving feathers in our export. I load in my final groom, in this case it's a little bit rough. Use the feather resample to create a proxy of my feathers all at once, and then use the guide deform to capture the weighting from our animated planes, which I just parented to the character movement. And in this case here, the feather deform is capturing the weighting for the deformation, so we can use it with the procedural. To get to feather renderings, the feather procedural node is giving us the option to create the barbs on render time, and we don't have to store huge caches. We just have to store the main curve with the barb attributes. The Husk procedural is taking, like I said, the condensed feather, and to see it in the viewport, we have to use the preview procedural node, which was already shown a lot of times today. And some interesting thing about the feather procedural is that we can use the create cubic curves, which is shown on the right, where we have like nice smooth barbs instead of like this really clunky linear curves. And another cool thing is the shaft point attribute, which is created on the feathers, which we can use to, for example, color the shaft differently to our barbs in our shader. And here's the workflow shown. I think the procedural itself was already shown earlier today. So I import my curves, the condensed curves. I create my proxy surfaces and the animated proxy surfaces, and animate my animated character as well, so we get some nice animation in. And after having everything in, we can use the feather procedural to define where we want to write our feathers into, what primitive. It should be an empty primitive. I had bad experience with trying to create it on the feather itself. I always had to write it to a different primitive, empty primitive in this case. And then, we can define our deformer at rest pose and the deformer at animation pose, and have our whole rest of the Solaris tree below it, and then in the end have our preview procedural node. And here we have, I've activated Karma XPU to have my bird, and we see it updates really fast, even on my GPU. We have this new Karma fur material, which has a melanin option, as already said, which is really nice for white hair, as we saw it on the eagle before. And yeah, that's the feather procedural in action rendered with Karma XPU. All right, so just for the end, for everyone who's more in the pipeline stuff, the cool thing with the new feather system is you don't have to throw your existing tools to the trash. You can just use them still with just some minor tweaks using some Vex. So this goes a little bit above just the normal grooming process. This is more for the pipeline side. But we can create this barb orient attribute, and I showed an example how to, for example, create it. So I used the tangent from the curve itself from the feather and queried the normal of the surface to create our barb orientation. And instead of creating points for the barbs, which we would have done before, we just have to write it into the array attributes, the p barb L and p barb R, and this is shown here. So you see your code gets a little bit smaller with the new feather procedural, and here I take this direction, which is in shaft or in barb space, Q invert. So I invert the rotation of the barb, which we will store, and put my direction in and store it as this barb attribute, and using for each loop to iterate over each barb point, we can easily have this working. And one thing I forgot to mention is we have to create those attributes before, because the size has to be defined. So we have to create those p barb L and p barb R using an attribute create. And additionally to the p position, we can as well use uv underscore barb L barb R. So everything suffixed with barb L and barb R will be a barb attribute that can be used. And here are some last, and I think it can switch back. So that was everything with videos. And I have some last pitfalls. It's my last slide. So the points are relative. Always keep the barb orientation in mind. So if you want to define it, you have to bring your world space into barb space by inverting the rotation and bringing it back to the position defined by the shaft point. So the shaft point is defining the origin of the barb. It might get complicated to get really de-intersected feathers which are really close. For example, on some chickens, you might see it feels like already a surface, and I had like a hard time to get this really nice on a concave character. The de-intersection might behave unexpected if you have issues on your geometry. So check your geometry if there's something wrong with the de-intersection. Interpolation with UVs can create problems if you try to interpolate the feathers and have your texture in the UV space of the feathers. You might get in-between texture lookups. If you use the Vulkan viewport, please don't put the first barb point at 0. At the point of writing this presentation, this was just culling that barb, I think as in some optimization to not draw any barbs on the shaft curve. And some limitation I found, which might be quickly fixed, but at the time of creating it, it was not possible to show the width or the CD of the barbs in the viewport. So the width of the barbs will be inherited by the main shaft curve width. The geometry shader has limits, so if you want a lot of barb points, it gets cut off at some point because of how the shader works. And so you might see that the half of the right barbs is missing, but it will be rendered completely. And once you uncondense your feather, it will still be there. So it's just not drawn because of the limit of buffers. And it's not possible to merge feathers with different barb resolutions as the number is fixed there. The feather procedural has some limitations which are already worked on, so that's not possible to have any deformation blur with any procedural, unfortunately. The point and prim attribute promotion is missing on that node as well. So you have to, if you want to have some extra curve view from the shaft, maybe for your shader, you have to promote it into barb arrays prior to rendering, and there's no skin deformation as for hair. So if you just want your character to move and you move your head with, or the feathers with your character, you have to go the way which I showed about how to create this surface representation and deform it then. And as last point, it's not possible currently to create barbulus out of the box, but as you see here in this slide, there are ways to go around it, and it's either to create hair, which will be deformed with the surface, or create your own feather procedural with barbulus, and I added some examples for those two things as well. Thank you very much. Sorry for the videos which were not working first, but yeah, I think we don't have any time for questions, so I'm here afterwards if you like to ask any questions. Thank you.
Can we at the end?